Superman was a fantastic movie not just in its own right, but in being this universe's first. We know a lot about this world already from Creature Commandos, but Superman is the perfect launching pad into this strange world for more general audiences, giving us a ton of information about the DC universe. I previously made a spoiler-free review you could go check out if you haven't already, but in this video, I will be going over spoilers, mixing between a spoiler review and general breakdown of everything we learned about the DCU from this movie. And let me tell you, there's one scene that expands this universe greatly, confirming the existence of a dozen new heroes. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and become a member in the noble tier or above for early access to videos, and let's begin. Right off the bat, we learned that metahumans started to become public knowledge around 300 years ago. Krypton exploded 30 years ago, David Cornsweet's Superman debuted at age 27 3 years ago, and Clark and Lois began dating 3 months ago. I love this as the beginning of the movie because it instantly gives us a base for this universe, quickly establishing it as a world different from our own, one where people are used to metahumans and magic and superpowers. It also tells us what exactly is the time period of the gods and monsters, and it's that entire 300-year period and counting. We already knew that there were robots in the 40s and monsters in the early 1800s, but this places the beginning of the metahuman era in the early 1700s. Superman appearing only 3 years ago means that he debuted in 2022 because this movie takes place in 2025. This means that it takes place after the events of the Suicide Squad, in which it was mentioned that Bloodsport shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet. Now, some sort of similar event to the Project Starfish mission in Corto Maltese did happen, but either Bloodsport wasn't there and he just doesn't exist, or he's just not a Superman villain, because not only did Superman not debut there yet, we also learned that he has never lost a battle before, and being shot by a kryptonite bullet and then being put in the ICU would definitely be considered a loss. On the topic of the Suicide Squad, this movie canonizes a character from that movie, as Flo Crawley, played by Tinashe Kajish Bolden, makes a brief cameo. Flo was a member of the Task Force X staff who rebelled against Waller to help the Suicide Squad. The others were punished by Waller, but if anything, Flo went up in the world, gaining access to extremely classified and important meetings. The DCU wiki says that she is the director of Argus right now, but I don't remember them saying that in the movie, and I do remember James Gunn saying that it's Rick Flag Sr. who is the director of Argus, or the one that will be replacing Waller at some point, so I'm not sure. Speaking of, General Rick Flag Sr. is the first character, or at least the first major character, not counting the cameos in Creature Commandos, to transition from animation to live action in the DCU. The plot involves a few fictional locations like Baravia, which in the comics is a European country and based on the Slavic accents. That's likely true here as well, while Jarhanapur is changed heavily from the Atlantis-adjacent magical secluded hidden civilization led by a superpowered man named Rama Khan to a poor village-based Middle Eastern country. Jor-El and Lara Lorvan are the focus of the big twist of this movie. Jor-El is played by Bradley Cooper, which was revealed that didn't shock me because it was pretty much revealed online, while Lara is played by Angela Serafian, and I'm just glad she's included. It never really made any sense to me why Jor-El would have a message or a hologram, while Lara is just left out completely. But as the focus of the big twist of this movie, they apparently sent Clark with the message to take over the world by spreading his gene as much as possible. I don't necessarily buy it. I think we'll get back to that down the line, hopefully learn that Brainiac or Darkseid or some sort of other intergalactic Superman villain. I would personally love to see Mongol change the message. Even if that doesn't come true, they stick to this, that's the lore of this version of Krypton. I do like this twist. I did kind of see a version of it coming, as Gunn has mentioned that Clark will learn something about himself that will change his perception of himself in this movie. But man, I did not expect them to go as all out as they did. The harem stuff, for instance, really caught me off guard. But I thought it made for a super powerful inner conflict for Clark and an interesting twist on things. Generally speaking, I am a lot more fine with them changing the Kryptonian side of things because, as this movie makes very clear in, I think, spectacular fashion, the Kryptonian parents don't really matter. They could have been anything. It's the Kents whose fantastic parenting is what made Clark the man he is. And man, that ending of Clark watching footage of his childhood, one of the greatest comic book movie endings ever. It was so powerful, a fantastic musical choice because of course, and left just such a huge grin on my face as the movie, and this is an unfortunate thing, came to an end. I would have loved to see more of this. And speaking of that ending, because we're already in this territory, Supergirl has a cameo. Again, this isn't exactly unexpected. I did know that Millie Alcock was gonna have a cameo in this movie, but I love this cameo. I already love Millie Alcock as Supergirl. I love the costume, probably even more than the Superman costume. It's instantly the best Supergirl costume, no question. What's interesting about Kara is that Clark has been around for 3 years as Superman, but Supergirl is already around long enough for Clark to be used introduced to her, and for her to already be regularly going off to red sun planets to get drunk. Also, we learn that Krypto is her dog, which makes sense, likely explaining how Krypto came to Earth. It was with Kara. I'm going to guess that what happened here is that Kara and Krypto arrived around a year ago, but Kara completely rejected the idea of becoming a human civilian. She made brief appearances as Supergirl, but didn't enjoy it as she felt no connection to humanity, so she became depressed, and then I guess an alcoholic. It'll be in her movie when we see her go through her character-defining arc, learning to connect to other civilizations that are not Krypton, learning to respect all life no matter what, and learning to be a hero before returning to Earth, and then finally truly become Supergirl. And I gotta say, with that idea in mind, the story it's taking inspiration from, the casting and the costume, I'm very excited for Supergirl. That said, Supergirl's appearance here does raise some questions regarding whether or not she was aware of Kal's message, if her parents were like that too or not. If she was aware, why didn't she tell Clark, and if she wasn't aware, why not? Hopefully it'll be answered in Supergirl. I kinda doubt it though, because that's not going to be the focus of that movie, so maybe they could reveal in a second Superman movie or something. We'll see. Also in that same scene, Superman Robot 4 named himself Gary, which was a fun moment. Generally speaking, 4 had some standout comedic moments, like literally every single time he spoke, I laughed. Speaking of cameos, one that did really surprise me is Peacemaker, and I love this moment. It was so fun. In hindsight, I probably should have seen this coming, since they filmed Superman and Peacemaker Season 2 at the same time, but still, it definitely caught me off guard. This is technically Peacemaker's first true appearance in the DCU, an appearance that confirms that he is entirely public and he is known to the public. It seems like most heroes are going to be like that. Most heroes will not have secret identities. It'll be the biggest ones like Superman, Batman, and the Flash who do. At some point before the events of this movie, Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner joined the Green Lantern Corps, Eddie Gathegi's Michael Holt became Mr. Terrific, Anthony Carrigan's Rex Mason became Metamorpho, also known as the Element Man, got married to Sapphire Stagg, and after turning into Metamorpho, he had a son with her named Joey, who himself is half metahuman. Then there's Isabella Merced's Kendra Saunders, who likely relatively recently given her age became Hawkgirl. Guy, Michael, and Kendra were contracted to work for Lord Tech, led by Maxwell Lord. Using the Hall of Justice as their base, they form a team that Metamorpho has now joined that is currently called the Justice Gang, but that's not entirely set in stone. The Justice League do not exist in this world, despite this world's long superpowered timeline. The identities of the Justice Gang are all public. While their backstories aren't really explored, we could probably assume that Holt's wife and brother died. Maybe he was inspired by the Spectre and the original Mr. Terrific, but neither of those characters have been confirmed to exist in this universe. Even if this is clearly a no-holds-barred universe, basically everybody is going to exist. Hawkgirl is likely a reincarnation of the previous, but that, Thanagar, and even Hawkman's presence are all simply not referenced. Hawkgirl, I think more than anyone, is in desperate need of some expansion. Her role was just a bit too minimal to feel like a fully fledged character, unlike the rest. Guy Gardner might have been chosen instead of Hal Jordan if he was closer physically at the time, like it was in the comics. They are of similar age, so that would work, but we just don't know. Metamorpho joining the Justice Gang brings it back to what it looked like when they first cast these characters together, a loose adaptation of the Terrifics. The Terrifics are also led by Mr. Terrific. They also have 4 members and also include Metamorpho. They simply swapped out Plastic Man and Phantom Girl for Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl. I'm fairly certain this will morph into the Terrifics at some point, maybe even with that original comic book lineup, because I can see Metamorpho and Mr. Terrific being the more moral of the two and maybe creating their own team, while Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl maybe not so much. That said, I felt like these characters had a good role in this movie. Like, Mr. Terrific was badass, had like the best action scene of the movie. He was funny and had a big hand in the story, while Guy and Kendra acted as characters meant to showcase Superman's effect on the superhero community. They were inspired by him to intervene in a global conflict. I will say Hawkgirl's inclusion wasn't the best. She definitely has the worst costume, has the least to do. She could have been swapped out for a litany of other heroes. They just needed a female hero who could keep up by flying. There aren't a lot of those characters, but it's not like they did something interesting with Hawkgirl. She has the least interesting action scenes, the least amount of lines. It's only really right at the end where she does something interesting, but even that is maybe my least favorite part of the movie, which is when she kills the president of Baravia. It kind of messes with the message of this movie a bit. Like, the message is that if you have superheroes, they should intervene in global conflicts to save people's lives, but at the same time with Hawkgirl's actions suggesting that they should also kill world leaders. I think maybe there was a scene cut that made that moment feel more sinister, maybe, because the way it was edited and the way it was shown, it was kind of like a triumphant moment, but that's not something a superhero should do. It's something that a member member of the Authority would do. What would be the point of the Authority if the superheroes of this world do it as well? I'm just hoping they show some repercussions to Hawkgirl's actions, because that was legitimately the only moment of the movie that I didn't like. And also a deviation is that the engineer is pretty much entirely just a villain. Her powers were really cool and at times used in very interesting ways, like turning around by rearranging her microbots, for instance. So creative. Still, she's pretty much just a villain here, not even really set up for redemption, something that is meant to happen kind of in the Authority if that ever does get made. And if that movie does get made, I think Hawkgirl is absolutely going to replace Swift as the winged member of the team. As we learn throughout the movie in the beginning and in the end, the Hammer of Baravia is Ultraman, which was expected, and Ultraman is kind of Bizarro, also expected. What I didn't expect is that he never actually becomes Bizarro in this movie. He's just a clone of Superman, who then seemingly dies, but let's be honest, he's definitely not dead. He got sucked into a black hole and absolutely is going to end up in the Bizarro world, where there he's going to degrade physically but maybe advance mentally into becoming the comic book Bizarro. Sticking to Luthor because he has his hands in everything, he apparently created a pocket universe by replicating a Big Bang, creating portals to access it from everywhere, essentially making it a gateway from any one place to another where a portal is built. It's also an illegal prison. There's also Mr. Handsome, which isn't really ever explained, but my guess is that he's a failed clone of Superman who was repurposed into being the pocket universe taxi operator. Everything I just said is absolutely absurd, but I love Lex's explanation of it, really showcasing his superpower-esque genius and unlimited resources while delving headfirst into the insane comic bookiness. Just outstanding stuff. It was in that moment and the scene where he kills the falafel seller that truly cemented this Lex Luthor before he even peaks in this movie as one of the greatest comic book movie villains of all time. Nicholas Hoult was fantastic casting, maybe my favorite casting in this entire movie. That envy speech at the end, what an absolute highlight. Genuinely, I just couldn't get enough of this Lex Luthor. I want more. Generally speaking, I think the scenes in the Pocket Universe were fantastic. The Superman and Metamorpho sort of team up was really entertaining and probably the visual highlight of the movie, while the movie's climax, the Pocket Universe tearing through the world, made for some really high stakes, really interesting visual background, and working perfectly to show Lex's insane obsession, willing to destroy the world to kill Superman while leaving lasting effects. Metropolis was partially destroyed, which can be, I think, an excuse for why it would look different next time, because honestly, I would like for it to look different. I would like for Metropolis to look a bit more distinct, a bit more like a fictional city. Maybe after they fix Mr. Terrific's blunder at the end, it will in fact look different. Lex also forms a group called Planet Watch to fight metahumans, which is an entirely original organization, but considering the name and the inclusion of the engineer, it might be inspired by Stormwatch, a Wildstorm Comics organization and the precursor to the Authority. So as it turns out, the character we thought was Solaris, who was going to maybe be the big third act villain, was kind of just a background joke character who at the very least did enhance the scene visually and comedically, but also he's a fifth dimensional imp. That's Mr. Mxyzptlk. What? Why does he look like that? And why is Superman not intervening just because Mr. Mxyzptlk literally only ever cares about Superman? Maybe Superman's just not taking it seriously because he shows up every 90 days, so he's just a recurring nuisance who doesn't really leave any lasting impact. Anyway, regardless, I will say this scene in particular is beautiful in its cinematography, its music, and its writing. Looking for the good in others is the real punk rock. Superman will sacrifice himself to save a bad dog because he's alone and scared. The scene was a true high point of the movie that really understood the character of Superman. Gotham City is referenced with a street sign that suggests the two cities are quite close to each other. Metropolis is in Delaware, while Gotham is typically in New Jersey, two states that border each other or are separated by a body of water depending on where, so the two cities being near each other makes a lot of sense, like it did in the DCU. At some point, Superman mentions an intergalactic zoo, suggesting that he's been off-world before, which does make sense. A lot could happen in 3 years. This version also apparently has hypno glasses to explain why people don't think they look alike, but frankly, this felt a bit unnecessary to me because this Clark Kent is the single most distinct from Superman any actor has ever looked. With the hair, the glasses, the way he looks, his posture, everything makes it it believable that people just don't notice. Still, that entire interaction with Guy Gardner and Lois Lane in the Hall of Justice was a lot of fun. But then, speaking of the Hall of Justice, I saved the best for last. This one is huge. In the Hall of Justice, we see a mural of the history of metahumans that if you don't look closely, you will miss it. Like while watching the movie, I was like, wait, is that Wildcat? And then I didn't see anything else. But looking into it and seeing what other people saw, it tells us a lot about the timeline of the DCU, depicting the heroes of the past. We see a few characters who, in the comics, also predate the 300 years ago time period we're given, a few characters in the 1940s, a few characters who it seems like were maybe present in the 20th century, but not in the present day, and there are probably others who we don't notice who are in the full mural. Maybe Batman is there, we just didn't see it. This includes Brian Kent, aka Silent Knight, who is an ancestor of the Kents and an unawakened incarnation of Hawkman from England in the 6th century. There were still British knights in the 18th century, so that's likely when he originates from, but either way, it's curious why he's on this mural at all, since he's just a regular knight. He doesn't have any powers, although it may just be because he was a part of some sort of magical event. He is related to the characters of Morgan Le Fay and King Arthur. It seems that generally speaking, the King Arthur story in this version of the DC universe is important and happened in the 1700s rather than the 6th century, because there are other characters affiliated with him who appear on this mural, specifically Sir Justin, aka the Shining Knight. Shining Knight, who you might recognize from Justice League Unlimited or Stargirl, is also from the 6th century in the comics, but he is far more supernatural. A knight of King Arthur's Round Table, he has magical armor, magical weapons, and a Pegasus named Winged Victory, who it seems like is also on this mural. Shining Knight is best known for his membership in the Seven Soldiers of Victory, who were active in the 1940s. He was frozen in time because of some sort of magical event in the 6th century, before awakening in the at the time present day. I doubt this will be the case here though. I think Gunn will make a clear case for the King Arthur and Merlin story involving Morgan Le Fay, Silent Knight, Shining Knight, maybe even Etrigan, for being the true emergence of magic in the DC universe. Super Chief is a Native American hero from the 15th century, either named Flying Stag or Saga no Wahana, I probably didn't pronounce that right, or he's the present day version named John Standing Bear. They all use an artifact named the Monatu Stone, granting them flight, enhanced strength, speed, and agility, so he has powers. John Valor, aka the Black Pirate, is a 16th century hero who does not have powers, but much like the other knights, work for the British Crown, but 1,000 years later. I'm not sure why he'd be in the mural. He has no connection to metahumans or powers of any kind. Maybe here he does. Maybe Black Pirate, Silent Knight, Shining Knight, and Super Chief were a team of some kind, acting as the Justice League of the 1700s to repel some sort of magical threat. Add 3 more members, and the Seven Soldiers of Victory is a pretty good name for that. But skipping the 1800s, where we know the Frankensteins are from at the very least, we could jump to the 1900s. Multiple members of the JSA are pictured, including Ted Grant, aka Wildcat, Jay Garrick, aka The Flash, Alan Scott, aka Green Lantern, and Kent Nelson, aka Dr. Fate. It can be assumed that these heroes were primarily active in the 1930s and 1940s before either retiring or disappearing in the 1950s. The rest of the heroes have entirely unknown places in the timeline, but we can't speculate based on when they debuted in the comics, as some of them do feel like they are from those eras. The breakdancing Francisco Ramon, aka Vibe, definitely feels like he belongs in the 1980s, while Andrew Van Horn, aka Gunfire, very much looks like the classic extreme armored up designs of the 1990s. Sticking to that, there is an Atomic Knight, the first of whom debuted in the 1960s, and he definitely feels like he embodies the sci-fi style of the 1960s, like the likes of Adam Strange do as well. Amy Winston, aka Amethyst, the Princess of Gemworld, debuted in the 1980s in the comics, as did Dominic Mindawa, aka Freedom Beast, the successor to B'wana Beast, who debuted in the 1960s. Finally is apparently Dolphin, an Atlantean adjacent character who debuted in the 1960s but is unmistakably tied to Aquaman and even Aqualad. This might mean that Aquaman has been around for a lot longer in this world than he typically is, or maybe Arthur Curry simply isn't the first underwater-based hero in this world, which is equally as possible in this very unconventional DC universe. Creating a timeline out of this, and assuming that this mural depicts the Gods and Monsters era, meaning we can't go further back from the 1700s. Silent Knight, Shining Knight, Black Pirate, and Super Chief are from the 1700s. Shining Knight gains immortality but disappears for a while. Wildcat, Jay Garrick, Alan Scott, and Dr. Fate all debut in the 1920s, 30s, or the year 1940 before forming the JSA in the year 1940. G.I. Robot was also built around this time, and Shining Knight would also awaken around this time. Atomic Knight is from the 1960s alongside the original Bwana Beast, and as we learned from Creature Commandos, the Metal Men. Vibe, Amethyst, and Freedom Beast debuted in the 1980s, while Gunfire debuts in the 1990s. I'm not exactly sure, however, where to place Dolphin. Also, to cap this video off, there is a prequel junior novel that is entirely canon that confirms Luthor's first interaction with Superman involved him creating Metallo using an assassin named John Corbin and a kryptonite power core. Superman defeated him alongside the Justice Gang, but Luthor retrieved Metallo's mostly destroyed body. This just pretty much confirms that Metallo already existed in this world. And so that is it. Clearly, just from this one movie plus Creature Commandos, we have an already more established DC universe than the DCU ever was or the Arrowverse ever was. This universe already feels mostly complete. You just have to add a few more characters, and that's it. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed something or which one of these references or reveals you found most exciting, and thanks for watching.